And hi everyone. I am honored to be able to give this talk today and to share my experience, my journey with remote sensing and GIS data, and my affair with ArcGIS, of course, as one of the tools that I use almost every day in my work. So I will go right into my talk. She's introduced me and told what I do. I just want to run through some of the things that we've done. My major affiliation, like she said, is the National Center for Remote Sensing, but I also have other affiliations as well. So the outline of my talk, I just want to start briefly with discussing how I started with remote sensing with simple tasks as a technician when I was employed with the National Center for Remote Sensing, then gradually transforming from simple tasks as a technician into a remote sensing researcher. So it's like going for one of these Nigerian weddings where you go as a normal person and then you get changed completely into something else. So it was an interesting journey. And I would like to share some of the examples of the work that I've done in this field, and then and what will be the takeaway. I know there are a lot of people from different backgrounds at different levels of your career. Some are students. So I'll start from the very basic, simple things that I've done into the more complex things. So at the end of the day, I want you to take away home that there are different capabilities for those special tools, what you can do with remote sensing and GIS. And of course, through my talk, you'll see why I've said that. Basically, I started with very, very basic tools where we digitize maps, we scan maps, old maps for Nigeria, scan them, georeference them. So it's just a process of like onion peeling. You have a layer of information there, you come back from analog, very simple task, but very powerful as well as a gen. So you extract layers of information from this, you peel them one after the other. So what I could do back then was to view them and also maybe prepare simple maps. I didn't really know that there was more one could do with this data. So this change actually, we also did the same thing with paper maps or paper records where you have chaos in your data that you cannot easily retrieve. But once you have this chaos, you can have a system where you use remote sensing and you use GIS to compile and build the geodatabase. Just like the first speaker has demonstrated, you can prepare them in Excel, but the beauty of having a geodatabase is that they have longitude and latitude. Just like he showed you, you can see their locations on Earth. You can pinpoint them to your location. So this was very powerful, and we did quite a bit of work in that aspect, my office, and individually or with collaborations with other organizations. So it could be anything, just like he demonstrated. It could be health facilities, mineral resources, police stations, whatever it is that you have data for can be translated into a geodatabase. Like I said, we've done quite a bit of that. We have also for Nigeria done some health facility mapping, converting it into a digital and a remote sensing GIS environment. We've done that for commercial buildings and done that with some experts for filling stations in Kaduna. And then most recently in 2020, worked with some experts to build a geodatabase for mineral resources in Nigeria. Funny enough, it's also a web map, just like what he demonstrated. So build a geodatabase that you can access online via web facility. So also in the coming years, when later on, okay, we can do geodatabase and all that. So I realized that there's far more you can do. So that happened when I moved from ArcView to ArcMap or ArcGIS. So now I was exposed during my master's degree to a lot of tools, very simple tools, but individually they don't have power. But when you start to combine these tools to solve problems, then it becomes very, very important then how you combine them. So from simple into research tools. So, so the critical thing is when you have a research problem, now thinking, how can I use this GIS, ArcGIS, whatever environment you're using, to solve this environmental problem that I see? So having been exposed to that, I did a lot of small projects here and there in the Netherlands where I was doing my master's. So I practically just experienced how you can move from just simple tools in ArcGIS, but also doing projects that have environmental relevance. I will not go into some of the projects, but my main research, moving from technician to research, was actually my MS project, where we were trying to see how much we can get in terms of renewable energy from built-up areas. So where you have leaves littered all over the place, you have grasses in the urban centers, you have waste from household waste and all of that. So we had the source of this this biomass, and what we did was try to explain or try to see how we can convert that into an estimation for potentials. So this was published. If you're interested in reading this article, you can, anything I show with a QR code, you can always scan and reach what this work is all about. So I'll be presenting quite a few that are published and you can actually access them. So after being exposed to that, when I came to Nigeria, so there are a lot of things, I just started to see in the environment, different problems. Oh, I now know how to use GIS, and then I can solve this problem, I can solve that problem. So one of the fascinating aspects for me was change detection. And I've done quite a bit with my colleagues in that regard. So the principle of change detection is simple. Like you have attributes. Attributes can be water, built up, or anything, or just the facilities that you have. And then over time, they can change. So at what location are they changing? That is the beauty of GIS, the location, the spatial context of it. So you're doing like a time slice analysis. You're seeing what is changing from what over time and answering environmental problems as well. One of the projects that we did was for Taraba State in Nigeria. So we know that Taraba State was created in 1991. And there's a lot of migration, there's increase in population. So the research question was like, can we see what is changing as a result of this increase? This is Jalingo, by the way, this dot is Jalingo. You can clearly see from 1986 to 2012, that is about 26 years, Jalingo kept on expanding, and you see that there's increase in farmlands, and also see that there's a decrease in forest areas. So clearly, we just had a simple research question. Okay, Jalingo, Taraba was created. Jalingo became the headquarters. What is happening around Jalingo and locations? What is happening around Jalingo and the settlements around it? So this gives you a clear pattern of what is changing from what to what. And then if you zoom into the statistics, you can clearly see, measure in terms of area, how much of what is reducing, how much of what is increasing. You see that the farmlands are increasing clearly, and also the vegetation decreasing in terms of statistics. Now, another change detection we did with a colleague is for Benue, Nigeria, where the research question here is wetland. So what is happening to the wetland in Benue State? This is in Makurdi. Now, this is an important location where there's a lot of cultivation, but also rice cultivation is. So wetland is an ecological importance. So we wanted to see what is happening in the wetland location. You can see from 1980 to 2012, there's decrease in wetland and increase in farmland. So now, looking at the statistics also, you can clearly see patterns. But now, growing into research, you start to ask questions. Why do we see this changing? Unlike in Taraba, where we're interested in just seeing what is changing, and you can clearly attribute it to the creation of the state. Now you have wetland that is far more complex to explain. Not increase in population can explain why you see the decrease. Increase in farming activities can explain why you see this decrease. But can climate change also play a role? So now research is becoming more complicated as it is. So you are saying, is there an increase in rainfall? Is there a decrease in temperature? What is happening? You start to have other questions that need to be addressed. Now, and change detection, there are different levels. What I've shown you is just the first level of change detection. where you have things changing from this to that, forest to farmland, farmland to built-up area, or built-up area from forest, or now farmland being fallow after some years and going back to forest. But then there's another level. There's a second and third level of change detection. Why do these changes happen? From what is it changing to what? So now you can see another level of change detection. So like I said, gradually understanding is, and we have more research questions and trying to understand the results that we see in a very broader context. So now we went to Borno State. The research area in Borno State is called Jeribal, like you see, just like the name implies. Very interesting area. So you were trying to see what is happening to farmland in this area, but note that there's also a lot of cloud cover in this location. Now, I forgot to mention, most of this change detection that we were doing then, it was just using one-time slides. So maybe you have image in October, another one in November, so you buy a slide, then you have to buy one scene of Landsat for $50 or so. So you buy one Landsat for this year, one for this year, and then you compare these changes. But are the changes also seasonal? Or could it be as a result of the changes in the data that we're using? So we're growing and asking more questions. Or these changes that you see, can it simply be associated to the insecurity in Borno State? Could it be that the farmlands are reducing as the result of Boko Haram? So you start to ask a lot of questions around the environment that can help you understand these results that you see. So like I said, the second level now you're trying to see what is changing what. Now you have a second level of change detection that shows areas that have not changed and areas that have changed. So you see that majority of the build-up areas have not changed, majority of the farmlands have not changed, but you can see a lot of changes from what is water, from what is agriculture, and what is the vegetation for the classes. Now that comes with what is called a cross table. So this cross table tells you what happened from one year to the other. Are you losing one class to the other, or are you gaining from one class to the other? So this simply shows from farmland to this, from farmland to that. So you can now calculate or estimate what is gaining at the expense of what. Now you can form this kind of hypothesis and explain why they are, or just do more research. I'll talk about that later in another paper. Now this is time series for another part in Borno State, because we were speculating at that then, by 2010, okay, maybe Boko Haram is making these farmers to abandon their farms. Now, more recently, there are even more attacks in that area. And this is Dalori. Dalori is close to the town. So we're trying to see what story can you see from satellite. Politicians and others are reporting, and NGOs are reporting that farmers are abandoning their farms because of security. Is it true? Can we see this pattern from the satellite image? So we start to analyze from 2014 to 2021. You can clearly see in yellow, you will see what is farmlands. And what is fallow is this pink. And what you see as green is the vegetation. So you can see from the start year in 2014, there were quite more farms there. But as you graduate to 2021, the farms kept decreasing and changing either to vegetation or to just fallow lands. Why do we see these changes? If I zoom into only farmland classes, you clearly see the same thing. What is remaining is very small as at 2021. If you look at the trend analysis, this yellow is the farmlands. You see that especially from 2017 upward, it's further decrease in what is farmland. Well, there's an increase here in what is brown here as fallow or built up area, and you also see a lot of increase in vegetation. So these results clearly show you that yes, indeed, these reports about farmlands being abundant in this area can be true, because this is clearly shown on the satellite image. Now, having shown you that, I'm moving to another change detection that we did for the Jos Plateau with my colleagues. This interest is actually for farmlands, for vegetation. This is Jos Plateau area. We are seeing the Mejuju plains where you have a lot of green as vegetation. But we're trying to understand this green in vegetation, will it remain? Will it change in the coming years. So we took it a level further now, not just seeing what has happened over the past, but use Markovian principle of change detection so to predict what will happen in the next coming years. So by 2050, you can see if nothing changes, probably there will be more vegetation in that area. So the probability of the area becoming highly vegetated increases by the year, but then we did not put other factors into play. We're just trying to see what happens as at then. So in another change detection, we were trying to see what's happening in Yobe State in Nigeria, where there's a lot of reports of desertification. So our class of interest here is sand dunes. So we analyze for Yupari and Yupari LGAs of the Yobe State from 1990 to 2015. What is happening there? Do we actually see increased sand dunes over the years? Yes, we do. If you zoom into sand dunes, you will see that clearly from especially from 2000, you see an increase in sand dunes, a decrease in vegetation, a decrease in wetland, and farmlands kept on increasing as well as built-up areas. Why do we see these changes? Why? So we start to think, okay, yeah, Yobe State was created around 1991 too, but this is not a capital of Yobe State. Why are the farmlands increasing there? Is the population increasing? But if you're talking about sand dunes and desertification, also climate change is very important. So we move to the next level of the research question and see, okay, clearly, okay, we zoomed in first and saw that in so many of our time slides, you can clearly see from 1990 to 2015, a consistent increase in sand dunes, except for this time slides where it's more or less stable. But in most of the time slides, a gradual increase in what is sand dunes. We also analyze what is changing from sand dunes. From what to sand dunes, you can clearly see that a lot of farmlands have changed to sand dunes. Like I said, this when you talk about desertification, it is not a clear cut. There is an issue of climate change where you can look at satellite image and conclude. So can we do some statistical analysis to confirm whether the changes we see in the Yobe State, Nigeria, the desertification, is it a factor of human activity or climate change? You want to find out more, you can scan and also participate. So you will see that in the area, temperature is reducing and rainfall is increasing. So in terms of climate variables, you expect to see a lot of green there. If precipitation is increasing, temperature is decreasing, we should have more green, not less green. We should have less sand dunes, not more sand dunes. But unfortunately, we see the reverse. So we test simple regression, multilinear regression, and see what's happening. You can see where we check the indicators for desertification, vegetation loss, increase in sand dunes, increase in wetlands, as against the climate factors. Where you expect to see a positive correlation, you see a negative. Where you expect to see a negative, you see a positive. Clearly, there's no correlation. We went further to check what happens with the NDVI. So we had MODIS data from 1990 to 2015 to see what's happening in the NDVI. What this says is that where you have a narrow gap is where you have a correlation between what is happening in temperature and rainfall and NDVI. NDVI is the greenness. How green is the area, not how bare. But you can clearly see as you move towards recent past, there's a deviation. You can see a wide gap between what is happening in the area and what climate change is. There's an increase in rainfall, but it doesn't reflect here. So this was some of our finding. If you want to find out, like I said, more, you can research. Now we move from change detection into spatial modeling. Spatial modeling, I love spatial modeling because it allows you to play with GIS data, and then you have real world situations. You can play with data to create a scenario that you can play around and see what changes if certain behavior in the society can change. If people reduce the way they cut trees or whatever, what will happen in the coming years, or how can we address certain societal problems? So spatial modeling allows you to do that. So there are a lot of models that are built, GIS models that are built for that. But what is interesting about GIS environment, like ArcGIS, it allows you to also build your own model. So you can either use manual mathematical equations in any of the GIS to ArcGIS, or you can use your user-generated models to build spatial models that also as accurate as those models that were built specifically for certain reasons. Now we've done quite a bit in terms, you can use spatial modeling for vulnerability and susceptibilities. We have done quite a bit of work in terms of this aspect, and I'll talk about flood and erosion. Now, from 2012 in Nigeria up to 2018, 2020, what you highly see is that report after report of flooding. Year after year, you see a lot of flooding being reported, and in Nigeria, people in everything that they own, their houses and their farms to flood. So in my office, as at 2012, we wanted to see what happens. Why do we see these areas inundated? So we look at the elevation model, digital elevation model, to see areas that are likely flooded in an event of excessive rainfall or release of a dam or water, for example. So this is a SAT-X image of Nigeria. You see what happens when we project that these areas are likely to be flooded if rainfall becomes intense. So we're trying to also estimate what can be affected, how much of farmlands can be affected when you see an increase in rainfall. So we're able to mark that out. But most recently in 2022, this company contacted me. Oh, we want to see why do we see floods in certain areas in Nigeria and we don't see some in some areas. So can we have a map that shows areas that are highly vulnerable to flood in Nigeria? So we just estimated a simple flood risk map where you will show extreme areas for vulnerability. So areas that are highly vulnerable, those that are probable, and those that are very we have minimum risks of vulnerability. So now we have this flood risk map. This is an area in Lokoja. This is what we projected as being flooded. When we compare, in this is an image, Sentinel-2 image of that same area as of October 11th. You clearly see that the rivers are not flooded. But if you see the same satellite image of 30th, just like a few days, 19 days later, you can clearly see that this whole area is submerged. So if you compare it to what we have projected to be submerged, you can see a similarity, or almost very closely depicting areas that have been submerged. Now, looking at another location, the Lokoja confluence, you can see what we have projected and see what was captured as a 30th of October that year. You clearly see that the submergence of water, areas underwater, is the same thing that we have projected that will be flooded. What is interesting is, yeah, we know we have predicted this has been flooded, but an event of flood, a lot of food is lost. Farmers are complaining everything is washed. But what allows the country to plan better how much we lose and how much are we expecting to import, or are we going to have less food and all that, is estimating how much crops that were lost. So what they wanted to see is that not just farmlands that are at risk, but what is possible that was captured by water. So we did a mapping that revealed areas where we feel they are likely going to be rice based on the NDVI characteristics, or they are likely going to be yam or maize and sugar. So we estimated that. In terms of soil erosion, like I said, I was going to show some of the modeling and soil erosion. We've done a soil erosion with some of my colleagues about just east in Plateau State. This is a catchment called Kurumi. Kurumi is a very important hub for agriculture and in terms of crop production and in terms of animal production. But then the area is highly susceptible to erosion. This area is very important. If we allow erosion to keep capturing most of it, it's going to be catastrophic. Like you see, roads have been divided, farmlands almost washed away completely. So why do we see? And then we're trying to estimate how much soil loss is there every year, and then how can we tackle this aspect of soil loss? Like I said, you can use mathematical expression in ArcGIS or any GIS environment to model once you have, or model a real life event. So we use reversed universal soil loss equation, which is called RUSLI, to estimate how much soil loss there is. This equation goes through the processes of soil loss, which have different equations, from the soil erodibility, rainfall resistivity factor, the slope length, cover management, with or without management, how much loss of soil would you have? So using raster calculator, of course, we generated a map for annual soil loss. So the first map that we generated was just showing the soil loss in terms of tons per hectare. So we estimated that every year there can be up to 440,000 tons of soil loss in that area from soil erosion, just using the rainfall, the slope, and other factors. But if you look at management, where you have NDVI cover or you have land use management in a location, the soil loss drastically reduced from 400,000 to only 83,000 tons per hectare. So it means that if more management are into place, we can reduce significantly the amount of soil loss in this area. If you want to read more about this article, you can scan the QR code. In terms of suitability also, we've carried out a bit of projects in that aspect. And then one of the few I'll talk about is modeling crop residue and renewable energy potential this is for a location in Bauchi called Ogoro. If you're familiar with ArcGIS, you know the model. So we build three aspects of the model. The first component is the residue estimation from groundnuts and beans. This is a hub of production for those two crops. See how much residues can be collected there, then estimate the amount of residue that can be converted into energy, then now do a suitability map to see where you can build biogas plants. This was in collaboration with some colleagues in University of Bauchi, people in their electrical engineering department. So if you want to know more about this article, you can go through. Next, I'll talk about irrigation dams, modeling suitable areas for irrigation dams in just East local governments of Nigeria. This area, like I said, is very important hub for agriculture. There is a lot of irrigation. You see a lot of crops produced during the dry season, but what is critical is that there's water scarcity. So they produce a lot, but before they are harvesting all of their crops, by April, there's no more water to water the crops. So there's scarcity. Some people have reported waking up as early as 2 a.m. to go and fetch water, so that there's competition on water. Some are disconnecting their neighbors just to get water. So we felt, okay, what can we do in that regard to model area where the government can build more irrigation dams? Usually these projects can be guided by politics. Then they build a dam and there's no water. But you can use GIS and remote sensing data to project where they can find water sustainably, and it can meet the target that is required. So we did that using factor maps from climate to environmental factors, standardize them in ArcGIS, and run a suitability map using weighted overlay to see areas that are possible to be dammed and you can find a lot of water. So we identified 10 locations in this local government. So we're trying also to compare the 10 locations that we have selected, what they look like in terms of land cover, what are they used for currently, what is the elevation, what is the slope in terms of engineering and all of that. So having done that, we also try to estimate the amount of water in the dam. Like you're proposing, but you have to also know the availability of water in this party. So we maxed out the proposed dams, used cut and fill in operations in ArcGIS to be able to fill this gap with water, and we're able to estimate for all of the dams the depth, the possible depth right now, or it can be excavated, and the amount of water that can be done. Want to know more about this research, you can scan the QR code. Now, in terms of groundwater potential with some of my colleagues, one of them is Edmond, who works with you. We were trying to see what is the potential for groundwater in Nigeria. We know that there's increase in groundwater, excessive borehole and well drilling in Nigeria. Everywhere there's drilling or borehole. But first of all, where do where do we have more of this potential for groundwater and where do we have less? So we modeled that using environmental and climate factors. We saw that you see most of the locations in the southwest and southeast or south-south are where you find a lot of water, and in the confluence and some parts of Yobe and Gombe State. So having known that, we wanted to compare, okay, where are the water availability in terms of ground and surface water, and where are the water demand? Water demand in terms of settlement, in terms of land cover, especially agriculture. So you see that most of the locations where you have density of settlements are high, also see you have water. So that's why there's continuous dealing, because they know there's potential for water and they continuously deal. But we have to draw caution. There are currently 260 million of Nigerians. By the year 2050, Nigeria will be the third most populous country in the world, with over 400 million people. If we continue to drill this water, will there still be water for all of us by then? So, which was why we tested this recently with some colleagues about projecting just the Jos Plateau location in Nigeria, using projected data from World Climate, the CMIC version 6 maps of climate change projections. So this is showing areas where you are expecting to have high temperature, low temperature, or rainfall in the nearest future. Clearly in this location, there is an increase in rainfall, if you look at the map closely, and also there's projected increase in temperature. How does that translate in terms of projecting future groundwater potential? Now, looking at this changes in climate, this is a positive. We see clearly that groundwater over the years up until 2100, it will show you clearly that there's an increase in water, but groundwater potential. But would it remain if we continue to harvest so much water in Nigeria? Would that translate into zero instead of more? So I've talked about basic things. We are moving gradually into now what I'm doing currently, which is far more complex. So you're talking about machine learning, just like in every aspect of society, everybody's into machine learning, artificial intelligence. Remote sensing Nigeria is no exception, especially remote sensing. So you have a lot of tools that you can use, but also the capability to store data in cloud. So, and then also the open data policies, especially the Landsat and Sentinel, where you have free data, you have millions of data. Now, using ordinary tools that we use of classification and all that, it cannot interpret fast or get meaningful information from these millions of data. So what you have is AI and then machine learning, where they can be able to compute more fastly this kind of data and information. So I'll show you one of the projects that we used using these very high tools. So we know that smallholder regions in the world produce over 50% of the production. They are very viable, but these estimates are from paper, from survey, FAO surveys, and all of that. There are no maps. Nigeria produces cassava, the largest producer of cassava in the world. Granite, maize about second in West Africa, in Africa. Potato about fourth in Africa. But there are no maps to show where these are. Are just this mere estimates from survey accurate? Can we use remote sensing to accurately estimate how much food is produced from smallholder regions? But then it's not possible. People have shied away from doing so. Why? Because mapping smallholder farmers are very complex. Like the name implies, the fields are very small. There are multiple crops. On one field, you find maize, you find cassava, you find potato, you find legumes. So these mixtures are a nightmare in terms of remote sensing. You also find trees there. Collecting field data is the most complex in the world because these regions are very difficult to access. So if you're planning field data, spend a lot of money to collect just a few data. So, but now we dare to say we want to try to map it. Why? Because there's availability, like I said, for free data. We have multiple data that can mine these complexities. We also have storage capabilities for millions of data. We have advanced machine learning tools, like I said. So in we wanted to do that for the Jos Plateau region of Nigeria. In 2019, we collected data. In 2020, we also collected data collection. From that data, we were trying to see what are the critical windows we want to map, crop types for that region. So we were interested in maize, potato, and legumes, but we're also not interested in mapping mono or where there's mixtures. So first of all, of importance to note is what is the start of season for each of the crop, what is the peak of season for each of the crop, and what is the end of season for each of the crop. So if you go into that, you build a phenology. From that phenology, you build a strategy that gives you information where to build a spectral temporal matrix. If you have spectral temporal matrix, it means a way that you can combine the millions of satellite data into meaningful windows that the machine learning can see and identify patterns for different things you want to map. So at the end, we had 3 critical windows identified. We used 9 spectral sentinel bands. We had 3 indices. We had 3 tessel caps, 11 STMs. And in total, we produced 770 bands. All of those other maps I showed you, we produced with only 3 bands, 1 image, but these capabilities in remote sensing have far expanded, where you can run analysis of almost 1,000 bands. So at the end, we produced the map, and then this is, as at the time we published these maps, the first ever in the world in terms of intercropping. People had not mapped intercrop, map maize or this or that, but never had attempted to map intercropping. And intercropping is very important in Africa. It means crops are underrepresented because we are mapping them as just one class. So this was very important finding in that regard. So these are the zooms for the maps. If you want to read more about them, you can check the article. Of importance is that the users and producer accuracy for this region for intercropping was significantly high. So indeed, there's a possibility that Sentinel-2 can map this accurately. We also look at field sizes. How do field sizes translate to crop type gradients? We looked at that monocroppings tend to be smaller than intercropping. Intercropping tend to be smaller than monocropping in that regard. You want to know more, you go into that. So currently we're working using AI, machine learning, and a lot of cloud computing to do a lot of other projects, which we plan to publish them soon. So some of these are in terms of disease prediction for plants, agriculture, bioenergy. Is it in West? Is it a smallholder or in developed countries? We also want to test yield predictions and all of that. If you want to know more, you can actually follow me on my research gate handle or academia, or you want future collaborations, you have comments and all of that, you can contact me. So thank you for listening.